Hello and welcome to a very special segment as the countdown to Budget 2025 has begun. We ask key questions really. Can Budget 2025 set new benchmarks? Will Budget 2025 pave way for India's emergence as Viksit Bharat or a developed nation by 2047? Budget 2025, will it set a broad framework for more reforms then? And what is the correlation between the usual annual budgets and the stock markets? So very crucial there, as of course the finance minister Nirmala Sitharaman is all set to present her eighth budget in a row. This of course is a record in itself. Now to decode all of this, I'm joined by Jayant Krishna. He is a senior economist, also someone who's led key initiatives of PM's Skill India mission. I'm also joined by Ambrish Balega, senior market expert, someone who's been tracking stock markets for over 4 decades now. Sanchita Mukherjee, senior finance professional, co-founder of Blue Edge, also managing partner at Talk the Walk. Thank you all very much for your time. Sanchita Mukherjee, while we will talk about the broader framework later, but first, Jayant Krishna, I'd like to come to you saying, look, will Budget 2025 then pave way for India's emergence as Viksit Bharat by 2047, as a developed nation by 2047? And can Budget 2025 set new benchmarks altogether then?
Yes, Sakshi, I would like the finance minister to use this opportunity to pave way for India's emergence eventually to become a developed nation by the year 2047 when independent India becomes 200-year-old. So I am reminded of Victor Hugo, who said that, nobody can stop the idea whose time has come. And this is, by the way, the quote from, which was used by Dr. Manmohan Singh in 1991 when he presented the most transformative budget. So I think, if you look at our Human Development Index, we are ranked 134 out of 193 countries. If you look at the GDP per capita, we are ranked 144 out of 193. So, the kind of HDI, the kind of GDP per capita which is required for us to become a developed nation, I think we'll have to grow at a minimum pace of 7.5 to 8% per annum from now for next 25 years. For that, it is very important to do some course correction for the country. I would really bat for the allocations for health, which are about 2% of GDP, to go up to almost 3.5-4%, and education, which is about a little over 3%, to become at least 5% plus. On research and development, which is just about 0.64% to become 2.5%. I know it cannot happen in one single year, but it will have to be staggered, and the directional change, the course correction has to start happening right now. I think this is very important, and I would really like the FM to announce, some, or at least a movement towards some big ticket reforms, which to my mind, the 5 would be transforming the regulators that we have in each of the sectors, and perhaps going towards a direct tax code, which has been long pending, strengthening the legal system so that, there's a better enforcement of contracts, not just by the domestic players, but by people who bring FDI to the country. Also, rejigging the trade policies with at least the major economies in the world, if not FTAs, then at least a more liberal, trade regime. That's very important. And of course, fast tracking the disinvestment. I think these are very important items to my mind, and also have some kind of a regulatory certainty in the country for overseas investors, go for land and labor reforms, and also a complete onslaught on ease of doing business and improving it big time. I mean, that would be my expectation from this budget if India eventually has to become a developed nation by the year 2047.
Right, very crucial there. Key expectations and key suggestions in a way to the finance minister. Ambrish Balega, what would you say about budget and the stock markets? For all those tracking their portfolios, how would you say historically we have seen things, and how do you expect things to pan out this time for the stock markets?
See, again, when we're talking of a roadmap for Viksit Bharat 2047, we need to see whether it will be for long-term gain, but there could be short-term pain. In fact, we have seen that in a couple of past budgets also. That from a longer-term perspective, it could be extremely good budget, but from a market point of view, short-term, it could be a bit negative. But at the same time, if you see the last decade, I mean, most of the budgets have in fact been a non-event, because the effect of the budget doesn't last beyond a few days. So I don't see the markets really reviving immediately after the budget because of the budget, unless it's a path-breaking one, which again I don't expect it to be, because valuations are still quite expensive. Now, looking at the specifics, I still expect like overall the spend on infra, railways, defense. I think that will increase. We could see possibly either 8 to 10% sort of an increase. Last year we saw record numbers, but the only issue was the numbers were record numbers, but execution was much below expectations. So this year, in fact, I see the execution also possibly picking up. As far as personal taxation is concerned, I think there can be some sort of SOPs, especially for the middle class salaried employees, because that's where there's a lot of pain because of the inflation at the ground level. And from a market perspective, I think whatever tinkering they had to do for capital gains has been done. I really don't see any further sort of a tinkering as far as capital gains is concerned.
Right. So those really are key expectations and suggestions there. Sanchita, to you then, Budget 2025, will it deliver on the broader framework really for more reforms that are needed? We're living in times where inflation has moderated, but so has growth.
Yes, absolutely. And let's understand this budget is being presented at a time when there are very high geopolitical tensions, and we have the president elect Donald Trump initiating tariff trade wars across countries. India definitely will not be insulated. Let's not assume we will be. So it is a very crucial budget. We must also understand that when we talk about GDP numbers and budget and all of that, private consumption in the economy is a very possibly the biggest driver of GDP growth. I mean, in 1950s and all, the GDP used to be 1 to 2%. What was the consumption? It was very high. But having said that, meaningful consumption in terms of what our panelists here mentioned, in terms of innovation, in terms of technology, in terms of drivers of growth, we're missing. Hence, we need private consumption to pick up. That has become a little slow. So to give away something to the middle class in terms of reforms in personal income tax is very crucial, right? At this point in time when credit offtake is also slowing down from the banks. Now, if you look at financial services industry per se, financial services is also needs to go up very high in terms of credit lending, in terms of attracting deposits. Certain reforms in terms of making deposits attractive for investors need to come out so that credit offtake can happen. MSMEs, business people can, enjoy the fact that, they have banks which have extremely high asset quality, but lending is now slow because credit offtake is not happening, though the demand is there. So private consumption needs to be looked at. Money for consumption needs to be looked at, and a focus on manufacturing, job creation, health, education, all of that needs to be looked at on a very macro level. Having said that, productivity, technology, even in agriculture, agriculture is 43.2% of the people of India, contributing to 18.2% of the GDP. Why don't we look at agricultural innovation, technology, giving high yielding seeds, going up the food ladder in terms of producing more apples, producing more fruits, vegetables, horticultural products, moving away from just the plain simple staples, which is your rice, wheat, paddy, millet, oil seeds. These kind of innovative thinking needs to come in. Look at employment in
Right.
employment generators like real estate, all of that.
Right. So you all have given key suggestions, as it were. But if I had to wrap this segment really by asking each one of you, give us one key suggestion for the finance minister ahead of Budget 2025. Jayant Krishna, what would you say?
I would think that reduce external borrowings, which have become at an all-time high of 80% of GDP, because the interest which is to be paid to service those debts is huge, and therefore the utilization of whatever allocations we make for respective sectors goes down by the amount of interest to be paid on the loans taken earlier.
Right. Ambrish Balaga, your key ask or your key suggestion then to the finance minister.
No, from a personal taxation, I would say make it simpler. Although that's been on cards, but every time they make changes, it becomes more complicated.
Right. So those really are your key asks from the finance minister. Of course, the spotlight on budget 2025 and whether we will see allocation coming, as it were, based on your suggestions, and then will we see the path to implementation, which is far more crucial. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, and thank you for your time.